Alright, welcome to the video, lesson 6. We're going to graph some more and also write graphs based on a picture. So we're going to write the equation of graphs once we're done. So our goal today again is to review graphing and then to write graphs based on a picture rather than the equation that we're given here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to graph this just to review what happens when we graph. The first thing you need to look at is whether it opens up or whether it opens down. And you could know this based on the leading coefficient A in front. If it's positive, it's going to open up, and if it's negative, it's going to open down. And we can see that we have a positive 1/2, so this is going to open upward. And we can also tell one other thing. We can also tell whether it's going to be wide or whether it's going to be narrow, depending on how close to 0 the number is. If it is closer to 0 than 1 or -1, then my parabola is going to be wide. If it's outside of that window between -1 and +1, it's going to be narrow. And 1/2 is inside that window, so we know it's going to be up, and it's going to be wide. So you can just kind of sketch what that might look like. It's going to look something like this. I'm drawing over the words there, but that's okay. The next thing you have to tell is where the intercepts are. Where the x-intercepts are, the zeros, the solutions, they're all the same thing. Now, in order to find x-intercepts, I must set the other variable equal to 0. So I'm going to set y equal to 0, and I want to solve for x. I'm going to have 1/2 times x plus 3 and x minus 4. And you can tell that it's convenient that we have this in factored form because now I could use the zero product property, which states that if I have numbers that are multiplying together, these are all just numbers, 1/2, x plus 3, x minus 4, I have three numbers or factors that are multiplying together to get 0. That means that one or all of these factors have to be 0. Well, of course, 1/2 is not 0, but I can set x plus 3 equal to 0 and find out what x would have to be in order to make that factor 0. And of course, if you use an inverse operation, by subtracting instead of adding, I get x equals -3. The other solution is when this factor equals 0, x minus 4 equals 0. I use the inverse operation to solve, and now I get x equals 4. So now I have two x values. What were the y values? Where of course I set the y equal to 0. So I have -3, 0 as my first 0 or x-intercept, and the second one will be 4, 0. And there you have it. So now to find the axis of symmetry, I need to average these two intercepts. I need to find the middle between -3 and +4. To find the middle mathematically means to find the average. So I take -3 plus 4, and I will divide by 2 to get +1/2. So that x is going to equal +1/2. And now to find the vertex. The vertex is going to be the highest or lowest point in a parabola. For this one, since I'm going to open up and be wide, the vertex is going to be right at the bottom here. If I get my pen to work, it's going to be right there. That's what I'm looking for, that vertex point. Now my axis of symmetry goes right through that vertex, so I'm going to use the y value from the axis of symmetry to find my vertex. To find the y value, I use the equation that gives me y. And so I'm going to have y equals, and it's going to be 1/2 times, and I'm going to put 1/2 in for x as well, 1/2 plus 3, and then 1/2 minus 4. Okay, 1/2 plus 3 is 3.5, and this is -3.5 times 1/2. I'm going to pull up a calculator quickly, so let me get my calculator here, wherever it happens to be. There it is. So I'm going to have 3.5 times 3.5, but this one's negative, so I'm going to make it negative. You see that? Hit this negative button. It's -12.25, but then I have that 1/2 in front, so I'm going to multiply that by 0.5 one more time. I get -6 1/8. So let's go back to my video here. So I need -6 1/8. So I'm going to write that down there, -6.125. It is 1/8. 0.125 is that 1/8 part. So now I want to put those points in my table, and I'm going to start graphing. -3, 0, 4, 0, and then the 1/2, -6.125. Now again, when you're making your graph, you want to make sure you have enough room for everything. And I was going to start to do it there, but I don't really like that because I know that I'm going to have to go in 6 below the axis. So I'm going to just start over again. I'll try one more time. I'm going to make my x-axis a little bit higher up to make sure I have room to plot my vertex. So first I start with my x-axis. I label that. Now my zeros are kind of centered around the y-axis, so it doesn't really matter where I put this. I'm going to try to put it in the middle maybe. So there's my y-axis. I'm going to make my scale go by every other block. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's +5. I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's -5 here. Needs -6 1/8, so I'm going to put that -6 in there. Graph some more. Hopefully you're following along here with your note packet and graphing along with me. Otherwise, it's a very boring thing for you to watch. Let's go ahead and plot those points. I'm going to use teal. And I know that I have an x-intercept at 4, 0. It's on the x-axis, and negative 3, 0. My axis of symmetry should be right in between those at x equals 1/2. And then since I went by every other block, 1/2 is right on this line. So there's my axis of symmetry right through there. I'm going to plot my vertex at 1/2, negative 6 to 1/8. So it's going to be right around here. I'm kind of guessing where the 1/8 is. I'm just putting it there just for now. You can see that I have this U shape, and it's a little bit wider than normal, not super wide, but let's go ahead and try to plot some more points. I want to put in -1, let's say. I want to put -1 in this equation for x, and then I'll get another y value. So y equals 1/2, and I have -1 plus 3, -1 minus 4. Okay, so I have 1/2. -1 plus 3 is positive 2. -1 minus 4 more would be -5. So I have -10 divided by 2 is -5. That worked out pretty well. -1, -5. I'm going to put that right down here where it's supposed to be. And because of the axis of symmetry, I get a free point. If I count, it looks like 3 small boxes to the axis of symmetry. I'll go 3 small boxes to the right, and I have another point at 2, -5. Now you can see my parabola is opening upward. It's a little bit wider than normal. Make sure to make your parabola look like a nice U like I am. Don't make any weird V shapes or go crazy over here at the end. Just put arrows in the end and we'll be good to go. So we already knew how to do that. That should have been a review for you. But let's go ahead and continue and go to the next part here. So now I need to write the equation of the following quadratic function. And now I just have a picture. I don't have any sort of idea what the equation might be. But I could see visually a couple things. I could see visually that it opens up. Alright, it opens up, and it looks like it's a little bit narrower than normal. It looks like it got a little skinny, so I know that it's kind of narrow, so my a value should be farther away from 0 than 1. My a value should be farther away than 1 or -1. Now because it opens upwards, I know that my a value should be somewhere in here. It should be bigger than 1. And so it should be larger than 1, it'll be farther away, it'll be positive. We know where the x-intercepts are. That's the nice part about this is you could literally see them. It looks like 1, 0, because I see the scales going by 2. You see how it's nice that they labeled those, so I know where these numbers are. So I have 1, 0, 2, 3, 4 zeros, the other one. Okay. The axis of symmetry should be in the middle of those. So if I average those, 1 plus 4 divided by 2, my axis of symmetry should be at 2.5. So x is 2.5 is my axis of symmetry, which looks right, 2.5. Let's draw that up. Alright, so there we have it so far. Now I need to find out what my a value is. And it's going to be hard to just guess. We have a point here though that's going to help us. Now because my zeros were 1 and 4, sorry, 1, 0 and 4, 0, I know that at some point my equation had to be x equals 1 and x equals 4 for my answers. So if I kind of go backwards and use the inverse operations to move the numbers over to the other sides, you'll get 2 factors that are equal to 0. And because of that, I know now that my equation probably looks something like this. I have x minus 1, x minus 4. And the way I got that was just taking these x-intercepts and setting them equal to x, and then moving those numbers over to yield the factors that would have multiplied together to get those if I set y equal to 0. I'm kind of going backwards now. Now to find out what a equals, I have to plug in a point. Right? I need to plug in an x and a y value, and then I just have to solve for a. And you can see here that I have an x and a y value right there. The 2 is the x, the -6 is the y. So I plug -6 in for y, a is still a, x is positive 2 minus 1, positive 2 minus 4. And now I can solve for a pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down a little bit, give myself some room. -6, and this is going to be a, and then what's 2 minus 1? Well, that's 1. 2 minus 4, be careful. -2, so I have -6 is equal to -2 times a. I added those, or something, I did it wrong. 1 times -2 is -2 times a. Remember, I'm multiplying all these. Now to solve for a, I have to just divide by -2, and you guys are probably already done with that. What does a equal? A equals 3. So now I have the equation for the graph. Y equals 3 times, and it was x minus 1, x minus 4. And there's no need to multiply this out to get what it was in standard form. I'm just going to leave it in factored form just like that. And that's a 4 there. Sorry, it looked kind of like a 9. I'm going to fix that quick for you. There it is. So not too bad. Let's try another one. Well, this one, we have a graph, we have no equation, so it says to write the equation of the graph. Well, it opens downward, we know that for sure, and it looks a little wider than normal. So I'm going to guess, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess that my a value is probably between 0 and -1. It's going to be somewhere in here because it's narrow, it's wider, and it's opening down. Again, we can get the zeros pretty easily just by looking. I know that the first 0 is at -2, 0, and the second 0 is at 3, 0. These are also called x-intercepts or solutions. Find the axis of symmetry, I just average those, -2 plus 3 divided by 2, so I get -1/2. I'm sorry, I did it again, +1/2. X equals +1/2. You could always check to see whether you're right by just trying to graph it and see if it actually goes through the vertex. So there's x equals 1/2, and it looks like that's more like it. All right, we know that the vertex is going to go through that point 1/2 something. Okay, and actually I didn't even find that vertex in the last one. I'll have to fix that in just a minute here. So if I want to find out what the vertex is, I have to plug it into the equation, but I need the equation first. Okay, so I know that the equation, based on my zeros, I would have x equals -2 at some point and x equals 3. So to get the factors, I'm going to add those back or subtract them based on what their sign was. And I have x plus 2 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. And those would have been the factors, x plus 2, x minus 3, multiplied together by some a value equals y. And now again, I'm given another point on top of the equation here. So I'm going to plug that point in to find out what the a value was. Now I'm guessing that a is going to have to be negative, and it has to be between -1 and 0. So just keep that in mind as I go through this and do the example. -1 plus 2, -1 minus 3. I'm plugging in the point -1, x, y is 2, into my equation. So then I have 2 equals, and it looks like a times +1 and -4. This is turning out to work out, I think. 1 times -4 is -4. Don't forget the negative sign times a. Divided by -4. This is a common mistake. A lot of people get -2 when I do this, but actually it's -1/2. So a would equal -1/2. And now I have the equation of the line, or the parabola, excuse me. A was -1/2, and I have x plus 2, x minus 3. If I wanted to find the vertex, I could literally just plug in 1/2 into here. I'd have 2.5, -2.5 times -1/2. It'd be 3.125. It looks like. Yep, that's about right. So there's how to write an equation from a graph. Given a graph, now we can write an equation here. All right, let's try another one. So now I have an equation, I have a graph. I keep messing that up. It's early in the morning. I have an equation or a graph of this equation here, and I want to know what it is. So here's the graph. I need to write the equation. This one opens up. Looks like it has zeros at -4, 0, and +2, 0. I'm going to go a little bit faster. You can see those from the graph right there and there. Find the axis of symmetry, add them together, divided by 2. So it looks like I have -2 over +2, which is -1. So x equals -1 will be my axis of symmetry, which looks about right if I go through there. Great, axis of symmetry. Now I'm going to write my equation based on its factors. Why is this not working here for me? 1 second. So now let's go ahead and write these. So I know that if x equals -4 at some point to get my intercepts, and x equals 2 to get the intercept, then my factors should have been x plus 4 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. So if y equals, and it's a times x plus 4, and x minus 2. Now, do you think this one's going to be wide or narrow? Well, I don't know. It looks pretty normal to me. It doesn't look super wide or super narrow. So I'm guessing a is going to be close to 1, but it has to be positive. Let's find out. Let's plug in this other point. Now, it's not written for me, but you could see it right here in red. The y-intercept is 0, -8. So let's plug in -8 for y, and we'll put in 0 for x. It looks like my prediction is right. For those of you who are quick at mental math, you could find out that I'm going to have 4, a times 4 times -2. That's going to make -8 times a equals -8. So if I divide by -8, a is 1. So now the equation of this graph would be y equals, and it's 1 times x plus 4, x minus 2. And again, you can find the vertex just by plugging in -1 into the equation. Let's just do that just for once, okay? So -1 in here, -1 plus 4. I run out of time here. It's going to be posit. Putting -1 in for x, you could find out that my vertex is at -1, -9, which makes sense here. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.